Tim, could you confirm that you hear?
Yeah, I don't think he's hearing us.
I don't think he's hearing us.
All right, we're going to start broadcasting now.
Chair Banuelos.
We can't hear you.
You guys hear me?
Now we can. Here we go. I realized that I was going to have to go through gestures, but yeah.
Right.
Tim, are you able to talk? We can't hear you. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
I don't see him talking.
Yeah, no.
Talking either.
Well, should Alex, since we have our vice chair here, can we open the meeting with the vice chair until Tim gets
Yeah.
on?
Yeah. Yes, we can certainly do that.
Okay.
And you're muted. I mean, Commissioner Moriarty.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought I was going to get out of it this time. So let's give him one more second. Chair Banuelos, can you hear us? No. Okay. Then let's call this meeting to order. I want to inform the public that due to the state of California's declaration of emergency, this meeting is being held via video conference pursuant to AB 361. City Council and Commission meetings are not currently open to in-person attendance. Ways to watch the meeting: you can watch live on channel 26, and you can access channel 26 via the website at www.ci.pinole.ca.us. It's also video streamed there, and you can also contact Planning Manager David Hannum at 510-724-8912 or dhanham@ci.pinole.ca.us. Before we add how to participate in public comment, let's go ahead then and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag
of the
United States of America,
to the
republic,
which it stands, one
nation
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and justice for all.
for all.
And just to say a land acknowledgement, before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Ohlone people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Ohlone land, the land that Pinole sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Ohlone community for the stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Mr. Hannum, could we have roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Current,
Here.
Commissioner Menez,
Here, I may need to step away at some point during the meeting. I'll try and signal that if that's the case.
okay. Commissioner Martinez,
Here.
Commissioner Benzuli,
Here,
Commissioner Wong,
Yeah.
Vice Chair Moriarty,
Present.
Chair Banuelos. He's here, we can see him, but we can't hear him. So is he counted as absence? I mean, he is.
Let's note that he's absent now and mark him as, note later on that his sound connected.
Okay. Okay, we have everybody here, so we can continue.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So the next will be citizens to be heard. And the public may address the planning commission on items that are within its jurisdiction and not otherwise listed on the agenda. Planning commissioners may discuss the matter brought to their attention, but by state law, action must be deferred to a future meeting. The time allowed is 5 minutes each. And to participate in public comment during the meeting, you may submit a live remote public comment via Zoom. Download, make sure you have the Zoom app on your device. And if you're using a desktop computer, you can test your connection by clicking in the digital agenda. From a PC, Mac, or iPad, iPhone, or Android, you can see the web address. And if you're calling in by phone, you may call in at the 1-669-900-6833. And you will be able to follow the directions that are listed on the screen right now in order to participate. So, David Hannum, do we have any citizens to be heard?
At this point, we don't have any citizens to be heard.
Okay, then let's go to the minutes. We have before us the meeting minute from November 8th, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve. This is Dave Currents.
Do I have a second? Second. Having heard a motion to approve in a second, then may we have a roll call as far as the commissioner's response?
Okay. Commissioner Menes,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Commissioner Benzuli,
Aye.
Commissioner Current,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Vice Chair Moriarty,
Yes,
okay, Chairperson Banuelos.
Yes, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
yeah,
finally
we
got it to
got
work.
you
Yeah,
now,
there we go.
okay.
Sorry, sorry about that.
Just in time. Just in time.
Too
Glad to
many things,
see you.
too many things complex. Thanks for doing that, Ann. So,
Yeah, no problem. We are set for, we're at letter E, and there are no public hearings.
okay, let me go back. Did you do the land acknowledgement?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't hear that. Okay. So, so we're at E, public hearings, and we don't have any. Old business, there's none. New business, number 1, 2021 housing legislation presentation. That's continued from last time when the cable went out. And that's the big, number 1 is that, and then number 2 is to be the 3-quarter specific plan, and 3 is going to be planning commission schedule. So let's go ahead with number 1. And Alex, I guess you're going to take care of that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess I can just share my screen as perhaps the easiest. Let me figure out how to do that.
Before we start, I just wonder if we should remind the public that this was actually on the last meeting, and there was a technical failure with Comcast where we had to terminate the meeting before these discussions were complete.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully.
Well, it won't happen again tonight. We're outside.
I hope not. So hopefully you can see that up on your screen.
Yeah, that's all coming.
And I'll run through, like the commissioner mentioned, we touched on this previously, or at least part of this previously. So we'll run through that part pretty quickly to get to where we were last time when Comcast failed us. But so there's three main laws we're going to talk about. SB 9, which is the law we talked about last time, which is the end of single family zoning, and then SB 10 and SB 8. So SB 9, as a reminder, requires ministerial approval without a hearing of a 2-lot subdivision and or development project for 2 units per lot if the project meets certain criteria. One of those main criteria is this is only available in a single family zone. So not just a lot that has a home on it, it has to be a single family zone. And so in some of the city zones where perhaps single family is, conditionally allowed use or an allowed use, but there's a lot of other uses, it wouldn't be allowed. It's solely allowed in single family zones, which are zones where single family is the predominant use. There may be some other uses allowed, but the main use is a single family home. So I just mentioned that, and that the area must be within an urbanized cluster. All of the city of Pinole is an urban cluster. These types of projects are prohibited in many sensitive areas, which are defined under state law as high fire zones or earthquake fault zones based on maps that are produced by the state. And even in those situations, there are a project can still qualify even if it's within one of those areas if it meets certain other standards. So for example, in a high fire area, if the property has been improved with the fire hardening that's in the building code, then SB 9 project could still go forward there. It's not possible in a historic land, if the property has a historic landmark on it, or if it's within a historic district. We talked last time that Pinole's historic preservation overlay that's been contemplated doesn't quite rise to the level of a designated historic district, in part because the goal of that overlay was to be very non-invasive and non-prescriptive. So just to touch on that, like I mentioned, it's still possible in a high fire severity zone if certain conditions are met. There are included in the law some tenant protections, which means these projects cannot more or less involve the removal or destruction of existing residential housing, either deed restricted affordable housing, rent controlled housing, which doesn't exist in the city, but housing that was previously occupied by the tenant. So properties where the home was previously rented within the last 3 years, that property could still have an SB 9 project, but it couldn't involve the demolition of that home or the alteration of that home. So ministerial approval means that the city has to approve it without any discretion and just based on determining whether or not it meets all of the objective standards that the city has adopted for these types of projects and which state law has prescribed. The law also allows for the creation not only of 2 lots, two units on a lot, but also the division of existing lot into 2 new lots. So take 1 lot and you divide it in 2, so there are 2 lots. And then on each one of those 2 units, you could theoretically build 2 units. So you could have 4 units where there once was only 1.
Alex, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I see Ann's got her hand up too. Since this applies only to single family zones, what would happen if we were to eliminate single family residential zone and allow 2 units per lot? Would that negate SB 9?
It could, yes, if you created, yes, what am I trying to say, like duplexes, sorry, for some reason that word escaped my mind. If you created duplexes by right throughout the city, in every zone, that would probably negate SB9. I think you probably, that process might be subject to CEQA before the city could approve that change, because there's not an exemption for that, because there would be a discretionary action the city could take, but it is a possibility. We'd want to look and think a little bit more to make sure there aren't any unintended consequences.
Of course.
Such as, creating lots of illegal non-conforming uses with all of the single-family housing stock, but presumably there's a way to allow both as permitted uses that would be allowed.
And if we did allow duplexes in residential areas, what does that mean for ADUs?
You can have an ADU on a duplex. Multifamily housing is allowed in additional. You can convert existing space to. You can add at least one. Excuse me. You can add at least 2 detached ADUs, and you can also convert some non-habitable existing space into ADUs. ADUs are also allowed under SB9 if there's not a lot split. So if you have, if you divide a lot and you build 2 SB9 units on each of those lots, you can't also build an ADU on both of those lots. But if you only split the lot and you only build 1 unit on each lot, you can also build an ADU there. Or if you don't split the lot and you build 2 units, you could also build an ADU on that property.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moriarty?
Yeah, thank you. My question has to do with the difference between objective and subjective standards. If you could give us an example of objective standards that we could use.
Yeah.
And what that difference is between the subjective standards.
Yeah, I think there's a slide on this a little later in the presentation. So let me answer the question then, but if not, I'll still answer it in a little bit.
Okay.
Answer it. So there are some restrictions on subdivisions. There's a minimum lot size, and also there is a requirement that each lot be at least 40% of the original lot. So you can't take a 10,000 square foot lot, keep 88,000 square feet of it for yourself and sell off 2,000 square feet of it. The lots have to be roughly equal in size. And once a lot is subdivided, it can't be subdivided again. And that is a basis for the city to deny it, these types of projects, if they can make certain findings that it would have a specific adverse impact on public health and safety that can't be mitigated. This is the same as the standard for denying a density bonus. And you may remember from previous meetings, we discussed how it's just very difficult to meet this standard, absent unusual circumstances. And courts have said that, these are this type of situation is something that would be unusual to occur. So when there's a subdivision, the city can require easements for utilities and for public services, but it can't require things that it might normally require when a subdivision occurs. And in Pinole, we don't have a ton of large subdivisions, although we did have one on Hazel Street recently, a relatively small one, but when you do a subdivision, the city has more authority to require off-site improvements or dedication of right-of-way to construct roads. And that's not something you can do when there's this 2-lot subdivision under SB 9. But the city can adopt objective standards. And the objective, the projects must comply with any objective zoning standards or subdivision standards adopted by the city, with a few restrictions. First is that the law establishes a setback requirement, and it says, first, if you're converting an existing structure or you're building within the footprint of an existing structure, no setback is required. And this is the same that exists for an ADU. So if you know, there's a garage and you tear down the garage and build a unit in the same footprint or within that same footprint, no additional setback is required. And otherwise, a maximum 4-foot rear and side yard setback is permitted. And that also is the similar requirement to what the ADU has. And standards cannot physically, so the city can adopt objective standards, but they can't physically prevent an 800 square foot unit. And again, that is similar to what is allowed for ADUs. So the city could, have a lot coverage requirement, for example, but if it would prevent the construction of an 800 square foot unit or 2 800 square feet unit, actually, the city can't enforce that requirement. So what some cities have done, let's take a step back. What this means, though, is the city can adopt the objective standard that you cannot have an SB 9 unit bigger than 800 square feet, and create that as a maximum size. And so some cities have chosen to do that, or some cities have chosen to incentivize things they might not be able to require by allowing bigger units if those standards are met. So although the city can't require bigger than a 4-foot rear or side setback, it could say, fine, if you have a 4-foot setback, you can build up to 800 square feet. But if you give a 8-foot setback, you can build 1,000 square feet or something like that. There are some cities have done that or thinking about doing that. There's only been a handful of cities that have adopted regulations already. So hopefully the next slide, we will be talking about more objective standards later. So short-term rentals are prohibited in these types of units. They have to be, state law says they have to be rented for at least 31 days or longer. And for lot splits, an applicant must submit an affidavit that it intends to occupy one of the units as its principal place of residence for at least 3 years. That's a pretty weak standard because, in a few weeks, we're all going to make New Year's resolutions about how we intend to do X, Y, and Z. And if we don't follow through on those, that doesn't necessarily mean we didn't have the intent when we, agreed to that. So it's a pretty weak requirement. And the city can't require any other owner occupancy requirements when a lot split occurs. For parking, maximum of 1 parking spot per unit, can be required, except no parking if the project is located within a car shared vehicle or within 1/2 mile of a high quality transit corridor or a major transit stop. And as the commission may remember from past conversations, there are no high quality transit corridors or major transit stops in Pinole at this time. Those would be BART or a ferry station or something like that, or fixed route bus service with certain frequent service intervals during commute hours that don't. None of the bus lines that run in Pinole meet those requirements at this time. That could change in the future, in which case, this would apply then. And as I mentioned earlier, ADUs in JADUs, if a lot is subdivided, a maximum of 2 units are allowed on each lot. So you can do that however you want. You can have 2 SB9 units, you can do an SB9 unit and an ADU, an SB9 unit and a JADU, but a maximum of 2 units. If there is not a subdivision done, then ADUs are permitted in accordance with the normal rules. So SB9 projects are ministerial and therefore are exempt from CEQA. CEQA only applies to discretionary decisions of the city. And the law provides that local ordinances implementing SB9 are not a project for CEQA purposes. So we ran through this last time, so I'll just do this quickly. But if you have a 2-unit project, lot with an existing home on it, you can choose to add a second SB9 unit. And that's fine. You could also include an ADU there because you haven't done a subdivision. If you do a lot split, once you have a lot split, you could have a home on one, you could have a home on the other, or you could have 2 homes on each, or you could have 2 homes on one and 1 home on another. But you could not do an ADU if you already have 2 units, a maximum of 2 units on each lot. Illustrated there, no ADUs are allowed once a lot split occurs. So objective standards, the promise slide. So objective standard is a standard that is uniformly verifiable and involves no personal or subjective judgment. So, saying your unit cannot be larger than 800 square feet is objective. Everyone can go out and measure that, and everyone should reach the same result of determining how long how big a unit is. Classic example of a subjective unit would be to say it must conform with the neighborhood character, or something where 2 people can reach very different results or make different determinations. Some person might think a 2-story building surrounded by 1-story homes is compatible with the neighborhood. Someone else might think it's not. Another example that's a little sort of more common, I guess I'd say, is a height limit. To say that height is 16 feet tall, that's objective. Everyone should be able to go take their ruler or their measuring tape out to a building and measure and see how tall it is. To say should be similar in height to surrounding structures is subjective, because similar means different things to different people. If the houses all around it are 16 feet tall, is a 20-foot tall structure similar in height? Some people might think it is. Some people might think, well, it's actually 25% taller. That's not similar. And so that is the example of the difference between objective and subjective. So the city can adopt objective standards as long as those standards do not prevent 800 square feet home. And this is similar to how ADU ordinance is drafted, where we can only enforce certain objective standards. So one thing to note is there is some question of how widespread this law will be used. Certainly it will be used in some places and in some some areas. I'm sure there will be some in Pinole over time. But there have been some studies. There's a housing think tank at UC Berkeley that studied this law and basically concluded that there's only a small percentage of units in the whole state where this is really even feasible, at least to its maximum extent of creating sort of 4 units on a lot where there previously was 1. And part of that is, you know, if you think about Pinole, many of the homes in Pinole, certainly not all of them, but many of them are, you know, existing single-family homes take up a relatively large percentage of the lot. And so in order to make it work or be feasible, it really requires some sort of alteration or demolition of the existing structure. And that, you know, might make it economically infeasible to the current occupants of the home to do that. And so it would take a while until there starts to be turnover in the housing stock before these projects may come along. And similarly, you know, if there's limits on how big you can build one of these units, it decreases or limits how much someone might be able to sell their back lot for. Because if someone, even if you have a huge, you know, 10,000 acre lot, and you have a nice 5,000 square feet that's completely empty, and you could split your lot and sell that to someone. If you only can build an 800 square foot lot on that, 800 square foot unit on that lot, it's the maximum someone's going to be willing to pay for that is a lot less than if you could build, you know, a 3,000 square foot home, or the homes we've seen come before the planning commission recently that are much bigger in size than 800 square feet. So some agencies have worked to try to adopt objective standards before January 1st, but that's relatively just a handful. Most are going through the process to try to adopt some objective standards, you know, in the first part of the new year. And just note, SB 9 regulates local authority. It doesn't preempt CC&Rs or HOA rules, and that is true for most planning and zoning laws. You know, the city, planning and zoning laws generally regulate the city and what the city can do as the you know, housing regulator for the land use regulator for the city. They don't regulate what private property owners might agree to among themselves. So I'll stop there for questions and comments. And one thing we'd also like, David is on, I don't know if Lily is on also, is whether we'd like to get a sense from the Planning Commission whether the Planning Commission would like us to bring a recommendation to the, or whether the Planning Commission would like to make a recommendation to the City Council to adopt Pinole specific SB 9 regulations, or rely on what's included in state law, and for now, and perhaps, you know, reevaluate in the future. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, David, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to confirm, going back to the page that talked about being close to a fixed route bus service with service intervals no longer than 15 minutes during peak commute hours. Now, I believe you had stated that Pinole doesn't have bus service more than 15 minutes, and so it doesn't apply. But I would just like to clarify that, you know, you take San Pablo Avenue, where you have the J routes and the CCC route, which each runs half an hour intervals, but yet together there's going to be a bus every 15 minutes, but they don't necessarily go to the same place. And my understanding is that that does not qualify as a 15 minutes intervals, and therefore Pinole doesn't have any routes that meet the criteria for SB 9.
Correct, because part of in general, part of that is true. For example, if you can imagine a situation where those two bus lines, you know, if they're not exactly spaced out exactly equally, then you're going to have headways longer than 15 minutes. Because if one comes on the, you know, on the hour and the other one comes on the 10, well, then there's going to be, 20 minutes between 7:10 and 7:30. So you don't, even though there's two within a half an hour, they're actually headways could be more than 15 minutes. And so, yes, it would need to be, one line.
Okay, and my second question concerns additional factors to consider on slide, on page number 16. About, you said SB 9 regulates local agency authority and does not preempt CCRs or HOA rules. So does that mean that if a development has CCRs or if there's a HOA, that they can't do any lot splitting, or they can maintain their single housing?
Yes, so they could do that, whatever if the HOA doesn't allow that, that would be, up to the HOA, but SB 9 does not preempt that.
Oh, that's a bummer, because I can look at some exclusive cities, I won't mention any, that, could very quickly form, if they don't already have them, CCRs and HOAs to say that no one can subdivide on their land, on their property, which to me defeats the whole purpose of trying to provide housing.
Yeah, I would just add, I don't disagree, but I would just add that most state laws do not apply, planning and zoning laws don't apply in that way. Just like the city has a height limit of, 16 feet or whatever the city's height limit is, HOA might have different, more strict design standards. And state law is generally focused on on establishing limitations for the city as a land use regulator, not on private agreements between property.
Yeah, this doesn't really affect the city of Pinole, but I just think that there were some cities in the county that are real close to a BART station where lot splitting would be really nice, and they're more exclusive communities, and I just see them kind of not meeting the need for housing in the state. It's going to be kind of thrust on cities that don't have exclusivity, and I'm not making it as a comment because there's really nothing the city of Pinole can do about that. I just think that's a real shortcoming in this law. That's all I have.
Okay. Frankie?
I took a mute there. I don't really have any questions for Alex at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Simon?
I guess my question is really focusing on the pretty much the last slide is if we do not have any objective standards as of January 1st, does that mean that literally when the city opened on the 2nd, somebody can submit a plan of splitting the lot into two and build something bigger than 800 square feet?
Then build something bigger than 800 square feet.
Yeah.
Yes. They would be subject to what is in state law, and they'd be subject to any existing, regulations that the city does have. I don't believe for single family homes, I don't believe the city doesn't have any size caps for single family homes necessarily. We generally would have lot coverage requirements or things like that. That might be out.
FAR here and all, so it's only setback, and that's what I'm concerning is obviously that usually the lots on Pinole is actually not that big. Some of them are huge, obviously. Some of them, the majority of them are really limited to about like 6,000 or 7,000. Some of them even in old town like 5,000 square feet. So if you split a lot, obviously you comply with the 12 square foot minimum lot. Definitely going to comply with that 40% each lot. Assuming 5,000 is split into 2,500. Somebody can actually split the lot and immediately submit something to build a 2-story high single family house, right? That it's as possible within that 2,500 square foot lot. So just want to share that so that everybody can think about it.
Yeah, and that's why we're working on we need to start working on these objective standards. So to make sure that we can regulate what we can regulate in terms of these projects.
And so that's actually follow-up questions with you, David, is because technically this is our last meeting of the year because of the last situations of the, cable TV screwed up. A planning commission can actually review it, prior to the new year. Are there any particular administrative, thing that the city can do to put some of those in place until, the regulation can be discussed?
I mean, we do have setbacks. We do have like lot coverage in a sense in that, you can only build within the building envelope of the city. I mean, we don't have like the 30% lot coverage or 45% lot coverage, but they can build within the footprint of it. So we still have setbacks, and we still have those and height requirements. We still have all those. It's just that there will be some additional issues with SB 9 that we need to bring forward. And so, and that's what we're going to be working on. We're not the only city under this gun right now. There's probably about 450 of them that don't really have standards yet, regarding SB 9. So, but I know they're all working on them. A lot of the cities, we're all working on them and trying to get standards in. And like I said, there is no penalty if we get them in March or April. So it's just a matter of getting them set and getting them approved and getting the right standards that we need to have for the city.
Yeah, again, not that I anti-building more housing. It's just that how we can regulate to make sure that, we can continue to have a standard of living quality here in the city, so.
Right.
I would just add also one thing. Certainly you're right, Commissioner. It is possible that someone could submit an application on January 3rd, I think is the first business day the City Hall's back open, and we wouldn't have any specific regulations then. But I think the city's experience with ADUs over the last few years is instructive. The city, when ADUs got legalized, didn't suddenly receive a whole bunch of ADUs right away. It sort of took some time for people to get a sense of what was and wasn't allowed. There's been a lot of media coverage of this bill, and I think people hear one thing in the media and then they contact the city and they realize, well, there actually are all of these requirements, even just established by SB 9. And so it takes a while, and even now I would say, the city is certainly process ADUs, but Dave, I don't know if you know off the top of your head or a ballpark of how many ADUs we've approved, in the last year, that weren't part of a brand new sort of single family home construction.
Oh, part of a brand new, we've only done like maybe one or two for brand new construction. And I mean, in terms of existing, we've probably done about, over the last couple of years, we've probably done about 20, 25, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Over like the last 3 or 4 years?
Over like the last 2 years.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, Anne?
Yeah, only this. Alex, just again on page 16, you said that there was a study done that said that only a small percentage of lots in the state or areas in the state would it be even economically feasible to use SB 9 to increase housing stock? Yeah. And so my question is what's the point? I mean, why, I don't know who can say what the state says. I mean, to spend all this time and money and energy to come up with something that that may not even have much of an effect. I would hope, as Commissioner Wong, had stated that there wouldn't be, a jump in for what percentage of the lots would it be possible for in Pinole? You know what I mean?
So I would say perhaps the multi-part answer to that. One is, I think they would even admit, the legislature would admit that this law is a sort of a compromise from people who wanted, you may have been familiar or heard about sort of SB 50, which was large scale sort of upzoning near transit and on major streets, that some had been pushing the last few years, but that had never passed, and so that this was sort of a compromise. And I think some in the legislature would say, that study isn't, that study may not be accurate, or there may only be a few parcels in the state, or a small percentage of parcels in the state where it makes sense to turn a single family unit into the 4-unit. But that doesn't mean that there aren't a bigger percentage where you could do a second unit where you previously couldn't do a second unit under the zoning.
Okay, all right. I had something else, but I forgot it, so never mind.
Okay, if you think of it, when we're still asking questions, bring it up,
Thank you, Chair Von Lewis.
Raphael?
So I guess first, sort of as a partial response to David Commissioner Curran's earlier comment about, cities working with community groups to set up, homeowners associations and CCNRs to circumvent the law. It would seem to me that if the city was deliberately going out of its way to set up quasi-private institutions in order to evade the application of the law, the state might not look kindly on that. And with regards to what this law does, I agree, it certainly appears to be limited in effect and impact, but it's possible that it's just apart from, the limitations of compromise and what can actually get passed through the state legislature, sort of a test case, like what's the actual impact of having regulations to cover this category of thing to produce this effect? Do they in fact produce the effect we want? Do they produce different effects? Have it on a sort of smaller scale so that if it works out, great. If there's some unknown, potentially spectacularly bad consequence, it doesn't hit everywhere. It just hits a relatively narrow subset of areas that it can be dealt with more easily than it would with a broader scope to bill. I don't know the intent of the legislature, obviously, but that seems like a logical reason to me. My question, though, was with regards to the building constraint limits. I think it was saying that you couldn't have rules that made it so that buildings on the subdivided lots had to be smaller than 800 square meters. I was wondering if the goal is to have increased housing, why would the city want to constrain the size of development on subdivided lots? Wouldn't it be desirable to allow for such development as the lot can maintain, subject to the various other standards that the city has in place, rather than creating an arbitrary size limit? Or is there something that I'm missing here?
No, that I was just pointing out that that's an option that the city could do if it wanted, was to adopt a size limit. But certainly that's not required by the law.
Sure, and you're also talking about sort of a transactional benefit to the city, that the city could sort of use that sort of a size limit as a trade-off for other concessions. But as more of a public policy matter, what's the benefit to the city of Pinole to imposing the side limit, apart from, being able to negotiate it in return for other trade-offs?
Well, I think that would be up to you as a commissioner and the city council to determine if there's a public policy benefit. I think some people would say, it helps, preserve the character of a neighborhood, by keeping, where there was previously one home, if you start to build huge homes right in that area, it could, some people might think it could change, the character of the neighborhood by taking what was sort of open space and backyards and putting large houses there. Whether you think that's true or not is, that's up to you as a planning commissioner or up to the city council as the ultimate decision maker.
Is that it, Raphael?
That's all for me for now.
Okay, thanks. Adam?
No questions for me, thanks.
I think it might be safe to say, and particularly, well, it doesn't matter whether it's in the valley or in the older parts of town, there are a very large number of lots that are 50 by 100 in Pinole. If you go down Pinole Valley Road and you see all the little houses off the courts and all that, but mostly those are on 50 by 100 lots. With that and with the pre-established houses that are on there, you'll see that the height and bulk of the houses take up a big hunk of that. So trying to get another building behind it can be kind of problematic. The other thing to think about is, like, for example, my property, I have a half an acre, but I'm at the back of one of the little courts across from the high school, and it's a pie shape, so it kind of goes narrow at the front and pokes out and then goes back. So you may have a big enough lot, but if the lot's really small at the front, you may not be able to get access in. So there's going to be some case-by-case things involved with all of this. I would be for kind of looking at some objective standards. But one of the things that that appears to be is, I guess, sort of the the fear in some of these things is that people are going to all of a sudden add entire floors on top of their houses now and call them duplexes in a single family area. But the height requirements that go on with ADUs pretty much nix that. The 16-foot height, you wouldn't be able to have a ceiling height on the second floor big enough to make that work. So that was one of my fears when this was first starting to kind of get tossed around, that all of a sudden we'd have twice as many higher volume areas in a place that really could only support single-story buildings. And so that kind of went away when they decided to maintain the height requirement. If you think of like a height and bulk, 50 by 100 square foot lot, and usually a lot coverage is kind of like around the 40% range, that would mean that a lot cut in half would be 1,000 square feet, which kind of falls into that 800 square feet kind of thing. So you'd have a lot of little houses. And it sounds like because we don't have the right interval of bus lines, that people would have to have a parking space for all those. So, I live on a court that's across from the high school that's very short. And we already have parking problems just with the single family houses because there's just not enough room. The street's not big enough. And so, and we have right now on our lot, we have, I think 3 ADUs that were reconstituted illegal second units. And even before those were done that way, we still had parking problems. So it kind of seems that for a lot of this alteration of density has to occur, we really have to do something with our local public transportation. And otherwise, it's not really going to really work. One of the things, I had a quick question, this is just sort of semi-trivial when you're talking about the 4-foot setback in the thing there that you had on the slide. I think you said 4-foot maximum, so that's as far away as that it can be from the property line. Because that's what that means, right?
Yes, that's as far away as the city could require.
Okay, because that was a little bit confusing to me because I was thinking that as a minimum. The other problem with that is when planners, wherever planners figure these things out, they never bother to ask the building department what that does, because at 5 feet and less, you're getting into required fire protected buildings. So if you have 4 foot, you're automatically having a 1 hour rated wall, and then you have trouble with the amount of windows you can put in it. And when I know I've done, I'm starting my 6th ADU here pretty soon, in this past year. And I always tell people, don't put them at 4, put them at 5, so you can at least have the option of having windows on that close side, because otherwise it's going to be difficult. And your costs are going to go up because you're going to have a fire-rated wall. So that's just a comment. That's neither here nor there in the process of things. But I kind of was the question that that Raphael brought up about the city generating their own or seeming to generate their own CCNR. I was kind of thinking the same thing. That sounds could be a little fishy, you know. And I'm not sure how that would be very productive at all to do that. It did seem that given the nature of our city and what's been talked about in this, that the splitting of lots wouldn't be that prevalent. Because like I said, you have a lot of little tiny lots, and along with lot coverage and setbacks, there's also minimum and maximum front property lengths. And so there's, some lots only could be a certain width. Like I think the 50 is kind of like the standard width, and then below that's considered a small lot in a lot of cities. And I think we're kind of in the same boat that way too. And that's a function of being able to access, the lot. So there is a whole slew of planning things alone that come into play when you try to do this, just basic planning stuff. And then you get into the building code things, and that's a whole other level in itself. So it's, my initial concern about over densifying a given city, whether it's ours or anybody else's, I've kind of calmed down from that a little bit. Even though I'm doing ADUs, all the ADUs I've done are on pretty large lots. But it kind of goes back to when we were doing the zoning ordinance changes, 10 years ago. And we had figured that in 20 years, when the next zoning ordinance was going to occur, Pinole was going to grow by about 5% to 10%. The arena numbers, on the other hand, said that we were going to grow by 76%. That would mean almost everybody, 2/3 of everyone in Pinole would have to take in a family. So, that kind of didn't make any sense at all, even with the ADU, even with these rules that are on, on the horizon here. So, I guess what I'm getting at, without finishing rambling, is that there's a lot of other things that take into account in doing these splits that are not covered, in these SBs that are going through. So, and that in itself kind of makes me think that we need to kind of do some of our own objective standards. So that's the end of my soapbox. So, Alex, did you have anything else on this? Very good presentation. It's, this is not a crazy thing.
I don't know if Commissioner Martinez, if the hand is new or if that hand has been.
Oh, did I miss you, Frankie?
No, you offered it initially, Tim, but I had to give some thought to, and thank you for acknowledging that,
Oh,
Alex.
go ahead. Yeah.
So where I'm at I'm trying to think of where would something like this fit, right? And so if we go back to last year, on Hazel Street, where it was going to connect into Sunnyview, the block from where Raphael lives, up in that area, the developer brought forth plans for 3 or 4 homes on that parcel, right? Dave, and I guess this question goes to Dave. Dave, are we now saying that those 3 or 4 parcels could potentially be split, each one of those cut in half, and put 2 800-foot units on that with this SB 9?
Yeah, once they're established, once the units are established, yeah. I mean, if they don't build what is built, then they could come back for a design review for the houses to build 8 homes instead of 4. But they have to establish the lots first. But they could do that, yes.
Thank you for that clarification. So I guess, do we as a planning commission need to do a little bit of work to find out how many of these plots are left that it could be converted in such a way, and then, because, and I'm going back to what the original developer had brought to this city a year ago. The homes they're really nice looking homes, right? And they would fit nice on that block in the community. Right. And I'd just be a little bit concerned that if we downsize the homes that don't kind of match or fit, that, you know, the community might be in a little bit of an uproar, and then we wouldn't be able to backpedal because we haven't established any clear guidelines on how this is to work within our city, right?
Yeah, and that's part of the development of the objective standards. So once we develop our objective standards, then if something like that comes in, then we've got here are your objective standards that you've got to comply with as part of the development of these lots. So that's something that's why we need to work on those.
Right, through the chair, actually, the reality for that Hazel Street lot, 4 lots right now is because we do not actually have an objective standard. If they build nothing right now, January 3rd, 2022, they can actually come back to the city and say, I want to split the lot into 8 and build 8 houses that is actually bigger than 800 square feet. They can actually build as big as possible, following obviously the height limit and also the setback that we currently have. So it is not small house, it can be huge 8 houses. Right?
I would just add that the situation with that particular property is a little unique because there's also a development agreement related to that property that binds them to do certain things. And there's an affordable housing agreement recorded on that property that requires 1 unit on 1 lot of a certain size. So there are some constraints, you know, on that particular project, but I think the general sentiment is, you know, this certainly could happen in places around the city.
Yeah. I mean, there's a plot right on the other end of Hazel down by Pinion that's pretty good size that could be done in that fashion if they decide to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any last minute things to add to this, or are we pretty much temporarily beating this to death?
Yeah, only what's the next step then? You know, Mr. Hannum, you were saying that we have like until March maybe, or, you know, whatever it is to get some objective standards, but that means that, you know, you come up with, you know, suggestions and, you know, go straight to the city council or go through the planning commission, or how does that play out procedurally?
I mean, I would recommend, and Alex, you can chime in, but I would recommend that you would want to see some design objective standard before we go to the council. They can go directly to the council, but if you want to see those,
and then they would come to the planning commission first, because all of the city's zoning code changes have to go to the planning commission first for recommendation. So they would come to the planning commission for.
Who's they? You mean the standards?
Yeah, the objective standards.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you looking for? We can't direct you, but I mean, are you looking for?
No, we're developing those right now. We're trying to. Everyone, like with all cities, you know, everyone's looking for those standards that, you know, that those first cities that have passed them. And so, and then, you know, everything's a modification of that based on where you are. So that's what we're doing right now. We're looking at cities that have got ahead of the game, and in terms of objective standards, or what some of the cities are even looking at as part of them. Also as part of our update of our housing element, we're also creating, so we will have as part of the plan as build some objective standards, but we're going to try and get something in a whole lot sooner than that. So we're going to be working with other cities and seeing what they're doing, and trying to get something back to you fairly quickly, because we don't want to be held up. We don't want to be out there with no standards for very long. And so what we might do is bring some standards to you to get adopted, get on the ordinance, or get them in the ordinance, and then continue that work as we're going through the our housing development process as well. So it's a continuing it'll be a continuing thing probably throughout the 2022, but we'll want to get something in place a little earlier than that, a lot earlier than later 2022. So at least get a placeholder in there and get some objective standards, and similarly what we did with the ADU. So we'll be taking a look at that ordinance to see what we can pull from there, and start looking at where we would put that in our code and start that process. So in fact, we've already started looking to see how we would, where would we implement it and how would we do that. So,
David, do you know of any cities around us or of comparable size to us that have adopted these that you can actually go look at?
Not that I'm aware of right now. Everyone's doing a listserv right now to see who's got them and who doesn't. So we don't really know who's, but a lot of cities are working on them right now, and so we're continuing all of our searches to see where they're at.
Okay.
So we should be looking at something in the early spring, hearing back from you and your staff.
Probably before that.
Great.
So,
okay.
I'm hoping to at least have something, at least a draft or something to you guys within like the next probably 8 to 10 weeks. So
right. So we're talking January,
late January, February.
Early February. Okay.
And then it's just going to matter how long it takes us to hash through all those.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Great.
With that, let's go to number 2, 3 corridor specific plan, Pinole Valley Road corridor information discussion.
Chair,
Yeah.
Wells, I don't know if you want to hear, there's a few more bills that were going to be highlighted.
Okay.
They're very short. We'll fly through them. But SB 10 is a upzoning law, and it allows cities to change the zoning of any parcel to be any qualifying parcel to allow up to 10 units of residential density on that parcel. And that would not be a project under CEQA. And so that normally when a city upzones parcel and changes the zoning, that's subject to CEQA and would have to go through an environmental review process. So the main purpose of this law is to allow this sort of potentially dramatic upzoning without having to go through the CEQA process. And I would just note that it's any parcel can be upzoned to 10 units an acre. Normally we think of density as something that's measured not per parcel, because parcels can be different sizes, but per acre. And so that is something that's now allowed. But I would note that unlike SB 9, this is a law that simply it does not mandate the city do anything. It's just creating an option for the city. So this would not be, I know some people have heard about this law and were concerned that the city was going to be forced to upzone. The city is not forced to do anything. The city council retains, complete authority that it has now to decide whether or not it wants to change the zoning pursuant to this law. It's just an option that some cities will pursue and many I assume won't. And then,
so if we have if there's a parcel that under the general plan is listed as open space, we're not required to upzone that to something that would have dense housing on it.
Correct.
Okay.
And even if it's a parcel right now that's zoned, for a duplex or whatever, the city's not required to change that zoning. I think the goal of this law is that, CEQA lawsuits are often can be used to stop projects. And so I think the legislature wanted to allow a certain amount of upzoning without a risk of CEQA, lawsuits stopping it or preventing that from happening.
Great, thanks.
And then SB 8, just very briefly, you may remember from past presentations, SB 330, which is the Housing Crisis Act that has a bunch of different things contained in it. A number of different elements. So, it creates this preliminary application process that locks in standards at the time a preliminary application is submitted. Previously, standards weren't locked in until a complete application was submitted, and a preliminary application requires, a less finished product. And there's a couple of other requirements that it allows entitlements to stay vested for an extra year, 3.5 years instead of 2.5 years, and a few other requirements like that were adopted under SB 330. At the time SB 330 was adopted, it was set to sunset in January 1st of 2025. This law would extend the SB 330, or this law does extend SB 330 instead until January 1st, 2030. So with that, that was just the last two bills. I don't know if anyone has any questions. If not, happy to turn the floor back over.
Looks like Frankie had his hands up.
Yeah.
Here we go again.
Go ahead,
I
Frankie.
try to, try to look at the practical way. On the last slide is the example, Alex.
Yeah.
If we go back, the address, I can't pull it that fast out of my brain. San Pablo Avenue, or Pinole Valley Road behind the 7-Eleven. There's the project that we've been working on, right?
Right,
If this
21.
directly, what's that address, David?
It's 2801 Pinole Valley Road.
Okay, so that project, because it had the 20% affordable housing in there, that basically, the work that we're doing on that particular project specifically falls in line with the requirements of this, correct?
Well, so they're sort of separate issues.
Okay.
SB under the Housing Accountability Act, the city can't deny a project that meets all of deny a project or approve it at a lesser density if the project meets all of the city's objective standards. It can still do conditions, reasonable conditions, but it can't deny the project or require it to be built at a lesser standard. What the law used to be is that you judge a project based on the objective standards that exist when it turns in a complete application. Now you judge it based on the standards that exist at the time it turns in a preliminary application, if it turns in a preliminary application. And a preliminary application requires something less than a complete application. It still requires a pretty detailed, site plan and a lot of stuff like that, but it's less than a full application. So it just moves the sort of the critical point a little sooner. And like you think about in Pinole here, there haven't been any significant changes in the zoning code, one way or another within the last few years. So it wouldn't really have made a difference here. But one thing the legislature, I think, they hear about a bad actor and then they make a law in response to the bad actor. So I think there were cities that, they'd hear about projects coming along like 2801 or something, and then they change the zoning for that parcel, or they do something, new requirement to that parcel to try to prevent the project from being, maybe not prohibiting it, but making it less feasible. And this is a way of sort of preventing them from doing that. And there are some other requirements in SB 330, a project can only have the city can only have a maximum of 5 hearings about a project that complies with all of the objective standards. We're trying to, keep processing quick, make sure it doesn't go on forever. So there are some parts of this law that certainly, have some impact on projects pending in Pinole, but I wouldn't say any major impacts for the current slate of projects that are out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, five
what's the 5 meetings or whatever? That could be a year.
Yeah.
It's still a long time, seems like.
Mhm.
Yeah. Raphael, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had some leftover comments on the SB9 discussion in particular with regards to Hazel Street. But I wanted to ask Alex first, since I live within a radius of that project, am I allowed to comment on it?
There's no decision before the city on that project. That's already been done. You can't participate. I don't, if you live within 500 feet of it, I would recommend you not talk about it, just in case for some reason it came back to the city.
Okay. So I think I do live within 500 feet of the subdivision, so I'll avoid making comments in this role with regards to that. But with regards to the other parcel on Hazel Street, the one over by Pinion, that's a much larger lot. And I think that's the sort of lot that could be feasibly subdivided without having, you know, access difficulties like Tim mentioned for the more pie-shaped lots and things like that. It's not a small lot, even given the limited amount of it you can see from the street. It's clear it's one of the larger lots in that area. And let's see, there was, no, I think all my other comments fell within discussing that subdivision, and I shouldn't do that, so I will stop there.
Okay. All right. Is that it for this particular one then?
Yes.
Anything else? Okay. So I guess we can go ahead and do the 3 corridors, specific plan stuff. If there's anything else you have on here, Alex, I'm not missing. I guess we can go ahead with that.
No, yeah, nothing further.
Okay.
Just before we go on, I just wanted to say thank you for spending the time to put together the presentation and, you know, for us and for the community to help. These are such moving targets, this housing legislation, that keeping on top of it is really important, and also understanding what the potential scope is. So putting it in perspective, you know, how much could it, you know, affect our community. So I appreciate both those things. So thanks again.
Of course, and just I guess one final closing comment is, you know, I would expect, this was a pretty major, or the legislature thought of it as a pretty major piece of legislation. So I would expect them to tinker with it in the coming years. You know, just like you may remember, they passed an ADU law, and then they passed a pretty substantial update to the ADU law like 2 years later, partially in response to things that cities did that they didn't like. So, you know, I would expect them to do something similar here, you know, maybe just tinkering with it, but maybe if they see, you know, like if lots of cities are adopting 800 square feet limits, and that's something the legislature doesn't like, you might see them change that, that law.
Okay. All right. Well, so we can go ahead and move forward then. David, are you back on this one now?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. All right, there we go. All right, so pretty much just kind of, again, this is part of our informational sessions on the 3 corridor specific plan. Just kind of, again, we're talking about San Pablo, Pinole Valley Road, AP Way. Tonight we'll be talking about Pinole Valley Road. And of course, as you're aware, we highlighted San Pablo Avenue at our November 8th meeting. And pretty much the goal of the 3 corridor specific plan basically is to preserve the character of Pinole and support commercial and residential development, can function as a catalyst for the economic revitalization and further city goals and objectives as outlined in our general plan and specific plan. If we can go to the next slide, please. Guys, again, this is where the specific plans are governed by California Government Code. We adopted ours in 2010. And of course, our 3 major corridors, San Pablo, AP, and Pinole Valley Road. We go to the next slide, please. Of course, these are the visions for Pinole Valley Road. They look very similar to the visions that we had for San Pablo, and Appian Way will kind of have maybe a little different slant, but they'll have similar to these as well. And that is because even though the specific plan operates on 3 different corridors, it has a lot of general goals and policies that relate to them all. So that's why sometimes you'll see very similar stuff for all 3 corridors, because the way the specific plan was written, really the land use and development standard, chapter 6 in the plan, is the differentiation of the corridors. Whereas with the private realm design guidelines and the public realm design guidelines, those are very similar in nature. Go to the next slide, please. And of course, there are the 3 corridors. And so we'll be dealing with the orange arrow tonight, which is the Pinole Valley corridor, which, as you can see, just in this slide, that it doesn't go all the way to San Pablo. It kind of stops right around Plum and Pear, where San Pablo then covers the Old Town. So Old Town is pretty much covered in 2 of the corridors, not just 1. So whenever we look at plans, we have to look, depending on which corridor it's in, and that in terms of zoning and development standards in that as well. So that's something that we always take a look at. If we go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is our Pinole Valley, what we call the sub area framework, and these are the 3 areas that govern this corridor. You have the yellow, which you can barely see on this slide, is just Pinole Valley Road. There is the specific plan pretty much in terms of development capacity stops at Seamus, and the rest of the road goes on, or not Seamus, I'm sorry, it stops at, I think it does, stops at Seamus, and then goes on along the corridor. And the reason why is that corridor sub area is mainly for landscape medians. It's for its actual roadway of designing the landscape features and the median features similar to match the rest of and the lighting and those types of things to match the rest of the corridor. But there are no land uses once it gets past the purple, which is our service sub area. And of course, then we have our Old Town sub area. So we have two sub areas within the city. If you go to the next slide, please. And of course, the zoning, this is the zoning for this area, the Pinole Valley Road zoning designations. Of course, we have for medium density residential and high density residential. We got some CMU. We have office professional mixed use. We have public, or what we call PQI, public, quasi-public, institutional, and open space. And so throughout the corridor, as you can see, right along Interstate 80, we've got the commercial mixed use, and then the OPMU, the office professional mixed use, which also allows for retail, is where most of our high-end medical stuff is, as well as Sprouts on the other side, the shopping center. Excuse me. And then, of course, a PQI in this area, which is actually the high school, which is the big pink area, the library, which is across the street, and the elementary school along San Pablo, along Pinole Valley Road, on the east side of the north side of Interstate 80. So we go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we're talking about urban design and circulation principles. And you've kind of seen these before. We want to encourage mixed uses that complement, support one another. Again, create those support the diverse land use by targeting mixed use development that can attract both live work as well as employment uses along with retail, restaurant, entertainment uses. We want to preserve the historic character and resources of Old Town, which in this case is more of the residential area and not so much, there's very little commercial that's south of Plum. And so along that, most of the commercial area is in the San Pablo corridor. So this is more preserving the historic, the old residential homes that are here and create those standards. Of course, again, enhanced pedestrian circulation ability for walkability. As you can see on the last map, there were, a lot of our major residential areas would use Pinole Valley Road as a major corridor. So the more we can make it a walkability, the more we can use it as pedestrian circulation, the better. And of course, enhance our auto circulation and reduce congestion at appropriate locations. We have the interchange, which that's a problem in itself. However, there are ways to help offset Pinole Valley Road. Most of the traffic is centered around the commercial areas, except on the north end, right? The north end, which is the areas where the majority of our residential units are. But they come in from different areas. So they come in from Adobe, they come in the back way, and not so much the interchange. A lot of people come that way, as well as come through off of our other interchanges, Appian Way, coming through the back way there. I've seen a lot of that, and to get to homes. And so there's a number of different corridors. There are a lot of different collector streets that can be used for that. We want to improve our public transportation connections. Of course, most of the bus stops are on San Pablo. However, there are a number of bus stops along Pinole Valley Road. A lot of those are some of the local linkages, like Route 16 and 17, that we're working with WestCat to try to get them back established and start establishing them again. Of course, during the COVID, they stopped two bus lines that ran through Pinole. So we're trying to work with them to get those get up and running again. And then creating standards with lighting and signage and visibilities through shelters, similarly to what they did on 1289 Pinole Valley Road, right in front of that office building with the shelter and that. And of course, then we want to enhance the connections between the neighborhoods, the Bay Area, and other recreational opportunities. Okay, if you go to the next one, please. Next slide. Again, parking. This one's a little different than San Pablo. However, the same thing still applies. To encourage on-street parking and support additional parking by building parking garages more closer in the commercial areas or closer to San Pablo, to be able to help offset some of the impacts that are happening within the Pinole Valley Road corridor. Encourage additional retail development at the shopping center by reducing the number of existing excess parking spaces. So even though our parking are in this area, our centers are a little bit smaller, but if there's an ability, similarly what we're doing with the project on 2801 Pinole Valley Road, that's something that we can take a look at as beneficial. They might not be these big projects like on Appian or on Fitzgerald, but smaller complexes on these parcels could be possible and something to look at. And of course, regarding the streetscapes and landscapes, always include attractive gateways and signage in our green spaces. And in this corridor, we've got the creek. I mean, the creek is the major pedestrian access and major recreational access through this corridor. We've got walking trails throughout this area, both on the backside of Sprouts as well as right down the middle of the separation between Tennant and Pinole Valley Road. So there's a lot of making sure we enhance those, make sure that those may be maintained, and maybe look at enhancing those with either some streetscape furnishings or some fixtures or any type of improvements along our portion of the trail that we can deal with. And of course, and then encourage business reinvestment on parcels that are vacant, or if there are some underutilized parcels along Pinole Valley Road, just to make sure we can increase density and optimize development potential of the corridor. And again, improve landscaping throughout the site. I mean, Pinole Valley Road is a nicely landscaped because of the front yards we have in most of the community. We've got tree line medians. This corridor has a little more of that approach that we would like to bring to the other corridors in that regard. So that's something that we'll continue to do. So go to the next okay, this is in part of the economic development land use. As part of what the potential was when the plan was originally adopted. They had no, that's not right. Can you go that's not right. Oh no, it is. Okay. In terms of the proposed residential units, this was there's about 72 acres across. There's about 141 residential units. Most of those units are on the south side. They were expected to do about 351. That was within the specific plan. It's part of the development projections. And so there'd be an increase of 210 units. In terms of the square footage, in terms of retail, there's kind of a loss because there was some of the projects weren't, development didn't utilize and maximize their potential. And so there was kind of a loss in terms of retail square footage. In terms of office though, they projected a lot more office space along San Pablo. And they're considering like a lot of the medical offices, even though it's just like in Kaiser, there's a lot of medical offices within those units. There's other offices such as on 2801 Pinole Valley Road, and throughout that in terms of square footage. So they were looking at increasing the square footage by over the course of the corridor about 280 square feet, 281,000 square feet. And then the industrial, of course, there really is no industrial along along Pinole Valley Road. And so whenever there was, they had existing 1,239 square feet of industrial. There was no plan, there's no zoning allowed, there's no industrial allowed anywhere along the Pinole Valley Road corridor. And so that's basically going to be the same yeah.
No, I'm sorry, finish your comment, and then I just had a question regarding the table.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they
industrial.
Yeah, the industrial part there. So, and we're not looking to put any industrial on or light industrial on Pinole Valley Road. I mean, the nearest thing that's there is the storage facility, which is more of a light industrial. But even that use in the OPMU is very limited in scope of what they can and can't do with that type of development. And that was something that, as part of the original plan, they didn't want to have industrial uses along Pinole Valley Road. That was more of the commercial, residential, retail, office space, those types of uses. So, so that's kind of where we were on that. So, I take your question on the.
Yeah, no, it was just looking at the slide and residential units. You have 1,119.
Yeah, that's a mistake. That's
351,
yeah.
Right.
I apologize. It's 351. Yes, I was going to correct that one. Yeah, that's 351. That's the difference of the 210. My math is a little slow that day, but yeah, that table. So it's 351 units were being proposed in that news. So we go to the next slide, please. And this is kind of what I kind of did was this is the project that's on Pinole Valley Road. I wanted to put what's there existing, but you can kind of see on the left, that's the project area. This project is more of an L shape, and you can kind of see in the middle of those parking area which would be on the lower right side. That's where the apartment complex are going, and these are some of what's existing right now, what it looks like right now in terms of those photos. So this area right here on the top photo, most of that area that you see on the bottom will be on the top floor as part of a roof deck, as part of the new development that's coming forward. And of course, the apartment complex will go in that corner, actually where that truck is. There'll be some setbacks there. So, and that project will be coming to you probably within the first or second meeting of February. So we're working with them on that project. So, and it's a 1.74 acres, which consists of 29 residential units and an addition of about 17,000 square feet of office. So, to the existing commercial center. So, if we go to the next slide, please. And these are kind of the opportunity zones. We talked about opportunity sites in the last one with San Pablo, and in all the corridors they had opportunity sites, and these are, and I picked each side of the freeway, and these are the two sites, which one is already there, which is Sprouts, and the other one is where the bowling alley is actually. So that's kind of where the Sprouts and the bowling alley are. So that they were projecting about, commercial with some square footages. Desired uses was medical offices and restaurant. In that case, they've got more. They do have restaurants in terms of fast food. There are a lot of food places in here. as well as the restaurant within the bowling alley. And so, but that was just what they were projecting in 2010 of what these areas would look like. If we go to the next slide, please. And this is the three sites, and the as you can see, and the site information is backwards. So the first site information is site 1, the second one is 2, the third one is 3. And of course, actually as part of the number 3, that's exactly what we're doing in part in terms of what's being proposed with this new development. They looked at it as a OPMU zone with the offices of mixed use, and they are putting offices and they are including a 29 unit apartment complex to make that more of a mixed use project. So that actually is coming to fruition. And then of course, on property number 2, they're looking at more desired uses, higher density residential units based on the size. That's about as many units you can get. And of course, on site 1, which is the corner of Ramona, right across from the high school, they're looking at more like convenience, retail, mixed use, and housing. So, and we haven't had any bites on these. We've had a bite on parcel number 1, but it really wasn't a use that probably would have fit that area. It was a drive-through facility, small drive-through facility, but it wasn't consistent with the specific plan. And then, so that's kind of the next one. If we go to the next slide. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the presentation from the slide standpoint. But what I did do is, as part of the development standards, is I put in what, like, the frontage types and what the city was looking at in terms of both the frontage types, the building types, parking types. I mean, a lot of these are, within an Old Town and service area of what the city was proposing in terms of, what the frontage type. And these are type of, arcades and galleries and shop fronts with awnings and stoops and door yards and terraces and porches, which in the Old Town we do. In terms of the single family residential units, we do have a lot of porches, a lot of old style or vintage style housing that does that shows that. Also, as part of the building types, I mean, these are the podium types, full block liners, half blocks. I mean, it kind of gives you an area in terms of the Old Town area or the service area of what the city was looking at in terms of design. So furnished types and designs, and of course, parking types as well. Looking at all the different style of parking types that would allow for parking. That would be in some of these areas, there would have to be some redevelopment of the area to make that happen. But again, that was part of the vision back in 2010 in terms of that. Also wanted to kind of, as part of the private realm, as design guidelines, we talked a little bit about that with San Paulo, but these were kind of some of the, I pulled out, 3 or 4 that are kind of like mandatory from terms of standards that we need to be looking at in terms of these projects. And site design shall be pedestrian oriented, not dominated by parking lots, automobile use, or unattractive utilities. Sidewalks and on-site pedestrian paths shall provide direct and safe access to building entrances and transit stops. Renovation of existing buildings with historic value shall preserve those aspects of the site and structure that contribute to the historic character and context. And of course, residential buildings shall have main entrances from the street to facilitate pedestrian activity and increase security through more eyes on the street. So those were just some of those. They're outlined all within the general plan, within the public realm standards and design guidelines. There's a number of them. I just pulled out four of them. There's probably about 10 or 12 of them that we need to make sure or put these projects up against to make sure that they're consistent. And just kind of, which I didn't do with the last one, but they're pretty consistent. In terms of the Pinole Valley Road and the infrastructure, we took a look at, the service providers as part of, existing infrastructure, and then of course the essential services. And so what I did was I included some of those agencies as well as us in terms of what we provide, and then and with that. So, with that, the last thing I want to kind of talk about is kind of like the economic development strategy, because there's a lot of things regarding that strategy, and they mostly cover all three areas, which that's one of the areas that the plan, when they talk about strategy, they talk about the entire specific plan areas. And so I included what was, most current with the Pinole Valley Road. And so I listed, 5 or 6, looks like 6 or 7 or 8 of those strategies that would help offset with Pinole Valley Road. So I know there's probably a lot of questions, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions if you have any, or what we're doing with some projects. So with that, that ends my presentation. Tim?
Sorry, I forgot I was muted.
Okay.
So start with Raphael.
So I have a few questions here.
Sure.
First off, a more basic one. Both in the specific plan generally, as well as this presentation, there's an acronym FAR, and I don't think it's spelled out anywhere. What does it stand for?
It's floor area ratio.
Okay.
That's what it stands for.
And then secondly, when there's, I forget which slide it is exactly, but I was discussing sort of the overall parking situation of the region. There was one bullet point that said, we should build more parking. We should maybe consider building a parking garage. And the very next bullet point says, we should have less parking. We should incentivize the development of commercial structures that require less parking than might otherwise be required. Don't those two goals directly conflict with each other?
Yes and no. And the reason why I say yes and no is because one is that by building garages, what it does is centralize parking, so it allows the rest of the parcels to be able to maximize their use and have minimal parking on their parcels. So yeah, that's why I say it's kind of a yes and no. Do we want to create more parking areas? We want to try to limit. We try to, I guess, maximize where we can and limit where if there are areas where there are multiple units, there are multiple commercial centers where you can use shared parking, so you're not creating individual parking uses for each individual unit or each use, because all the uses have different requirements for parking. Like retail might have, one parking space for 250 square feet of floor area, or gross floor area, or one would say one type of development might have one space per 200 square feet of floor area. So instead of having to meet all of the meeting all those requirements with those individual units, it allows for shared parking, so it actually limits parking within those areas. So that's kind of a yes/no kind of a standard in terms of what we want to do with parking and how we assess the parking requirements. So yeah, we want to, where we can reduce parking, we want to, and where we need to add it or create these garages where you can centralize, where people can centralize their parking and move about, the commercial areas or that. So, which could also help create more floor area, whether it's restaurant or, or retail or even higher density residential.
Through the chair, if I could interject, giving a historic perspective on the reason why that parking garage was included. First of all, back in 2010, there was a strong citizen concern about the quote lack of parking in the Old Town area. It appeared to me that if you couldn't park right in front of a store, there was a parking problem, and that doesn't seem to be as much outcry about that as people realize that there is sufficient parking in the Old Town area. And the second thing I wanted to add is that when we're looking at that parking structure, that was when before redevelopment agency was dissolved, and it was kind of looked upon as maybe a project that the redevelopment agency might want to take on. But I think it's a different world than it was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and part of that too was one of the places that we were looking at the time. It was kind of coinciding with the lease of the post office coming up. And so there was talk about if the post office goes away, maybe we do a structure there. That's where that was landing. And then generally, it's going to be different in different places, because there's going to be in the same corridor, you're going to have much more residential versus the commercial, like you were mentioning. And then just as a comment, when you go to the Pinole Valley Shopping Center, keep in mind, that was done with a variance that reduced the number of parking spaces by 100. That's why when you go there, it's always busy, because there's 100 less parking spaces than was really required for that. That, in a sense, at the time, sort of helped maximize what we were getting for the retail spaces.
So I guess sort of leading back into parking structure, because I remember talking about this, though my memory could be faulty, back in August when there was sort of more of a general overview of all of the various parts of specific plans before the commission started digging in deeper into each of the plans. And at that meeting, there was basically a discussion at the same point, and David just brought up, there was a discussion of a parking garage, but it wasn't really cost effective after redevelopment went away and there was less demand for it. So I guess I'm wondering, is it still sort of a desire of the city to build a parking garage within this area, even if there's not an active plan for it now?
I think that would be up to the, I think what's interesting about parking is as each of these projects come through, they're always requesting less parking, and we actually have in our code where they can get a conditional use permit for less parking if specific findings are made. So and of course parking is one of those necessary evils for all uses. So I don't think it's necessary actually looking to build a garage somewhere, but if something were to lend itself, the parcel would lend itself for that, I think that's something that the city we should be able to look at. Or if there's a project where, like I know with some cities, what they're doing is they're not necessarily building garage structures, but what they'll do is they'll build 2 floors of parking and then add three stories of either commercial or residential, so that at least, and then, the bottom floor becomes general parking, and, the second floor is parking for the people that live there or work there or that type of stuff. So, so there are other ways where we can get that, we can get that parking without doing just like a 5-story garage structure, or something of that nature. So.
Right. And then I had one other question that was sort of more specific to the 3 corridors, specific plan standards. On page 6.0-36, that would be page 248, I think, of the specific plan PDF. There's a discussion of cottage industry under industrial uses as opposed to home-based businesses or whatnot. And it noted that it was permitted in some of the sub areas. So I'm wondering, what is cottage industry defined as compared to home-based businesses or whatnot? Is it like small restaurants or?
Well, yeah, I'll give you an example. Perfect example is 812 San Pablo. That building, in that structure, they have, it's kind of like I call a restaurant incubator, where if you have you want to have a restaurant, you want to start a restaurant, you can go in there, rent space out from them, and then you can do your restaurant stuff and create your business and move things forward. So instead of it being at your house, that you create these kind of like, for a better lack of term, like small incubators where you can create, in a building, you might be able to put in 5, 6, 7, 8 of the same thing. Like bakers or small bakeries or small restaurants. So there's a lot of 812 San Pablo does that, and they do a really good job. A lot of the restaurants they cater out to other people, and then when they get big enough, they look for spaces to create their own. So that's kind of why, instead of doing like a lot of the new laws for cottage industries, allow you now to do it at your house. So you can have people come to your house, you can have baking, you still have to go through the environmental health process to make sure that your stuff is legitimate. But it's just to get it out of the houses and into these little, incubators or little businesses instead of at your house. That's all.
Okay, and then one more question, I guess, with regards to office square footage. It says, 105,038 square feet was existing, and then 386,843 is proposed. And is the proposed space proposed as of now or increased space compared to what existed in 2010?
No, it's basically, it has the capacity to get to so it has the capacity of and I put that in my staff report. So for example, there's existing office, there's existing 100,000 square feet. There's a potential based on the zoning and the standards that we have within our zonings, our commercial mixed use and our residential mixed use and those types of things to have an additional 281,000 square foot of office. So in those, if you go back to the land use map, we can, let's see, where is that at? So if we look at, if you look at the Pinole Valley Road corridor within the OPMU, or within the service area, as you can see, there's a lot of room for offices. In the commercial mixed use, you can also have offices depending on what your, depending on what type of office. And then, and of course, in the residential areas, you can have there could be a lot of home-based offices, home-based stuff that you can do within your, and live work type facilities within those areas as well. So, yeah, there we go. So within the medium density residential. So that they included all of those areas and all those types of business to be able to come up with that additional 200,000 square feet of office.
Okay, I was just wondering whether that was already all accounted for by the development of stuff around Kaiser, or whether it also included future potential. It sounds like a lot of it's future potential.
Yeah, I mean, when Kaiser came in that took a lot of I mean, that came in after the specific plan, along with the other gateway projects. And so, yeah, so some of that took that it's already been built, but there's still other areas that could be used as well.
Yeah, because the main reason I was asking was when we were talking about the similar sort of chart of potentials for San Pablo Avenue, a lot of the items that came up on there were because of development projects that were going to be showing up before us pretty shortly, like the development over in Encina and San Pablo, the apartment building, that sort of thing. So I was wondering if that was going to be a similar thing there, but it sounds like it's more just a future potential thing.
For Pinole Valley Road, yeah.
Okay, that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Okay. Ann?
Yeah, thanks. So I've got kind of a bunch of questions / comments. I'm not sure, what are in our purview or what we can do, but just thinking about one, the local road safety. And we've got numerous intersections and areas. I mean, Pinole Valley Road has got the potential to be just a fabulous, a bike and pedestrian, safe thing, but we've got some real problematic intersections. One that we talked about before with the San Pablo Avenue and Pinole Valley Road, and then out past the high school run, kind of where Tim lives, where the courts, when you're coming towards town from the Y, the Castro Ranch Y, but you're close in, and the road narrows to a point where it's like a bike and a car can't both fit there, and that's potentially dangerous. So I was wondering if you could address what the status is of the LRST for us. Do you know?
In terms of what? I'm sorry, the LRSC?
The local road safety discussion.
That I'd have to get more information on that. I'm not quite aware of where we are with that. I mean, with the corridor section of the plan. I mean, I'll have to go look more into that, of what the right of way is in there. There could be additional right of way that's there that hasn't been improved yet, either one way or the other. And so, or it hasn't been fully developed. So That's something that I'll have to take a look at and see where we're at on that portion of it.
Okay, I mean, that's just a general comment for the entire corridor, because you do have the, getting to Trader Joe's from Old Town, if you're walking, is both good, but also problematic once you're underneath the freeway and you've got all that traffic right there.
Right.
Also, I was wondering about, I couldn't find in our specific plan if we had anything specific to a creek ordinance or creek use or creek, kinds of things. And I was just thinking about, when we think about environmental upgrades,
right,
or like including permeable pavement for the little bike lane that's back behind Collins School and the bowling alley. And
right.
What about doing a creek rehab, getting rid of all the invasive species and such from Tennant Avenue to San Pablo Avenue? Are any of those aren't our purview necessarily, but are those addressed anywhere in the corridor, the 3-corridor plan?
Probably, to be honest, I haven't found anything that addresses those policies directly. However, we could have those within the general plan. So even though it might not be in the specific plan, we still might have some goals and policies. In fact, I'm pulling up the natural resources area right now because there could be some goals and policies, and that's something we might be able to take a look at. It talks about the regional and local trails and some of the goals. So that's something that, as part of the general plan, we could take a look at to see if there's something that we can do there. Because it talks about because most of the time the irony in that is that a creek plan or that would come out of the general plan, not so much the specific plan. So we can take a look and see if there's some action items that would involve in doing that through our open space element, through our natural and open space, also probably our community character. There might be some plans that might be that we can take a look at to see if there's if we can that we can pull out of.
Yeah, because that would be great. I mean, thinking specifically of the creek kind of stuff. I mean, if we have it written, this 3-corridor specific plan is just phenomenal. And if we could use it then to get grants, to get, things that could really improve the city, wow. I mean, it could be great. So if we, I'll have to look again through the general plan as far as specific things regarding the creek, to see what the options would be. Okay, and you don't know, one of the other things that was mentioned is the gateway, there being a gateway to, Old Town and such. And I'm remembering the DeVita building and that whole development there, that was intended, I thought, to be a much more significant gateway into Old Town, but now it's a chain link fence and electric, box and, that kind of thing. Has there ever been any more discussion about pursuing that as making it a more significant gateway?
Well, I think there's been some discussion regarding because we have some of our, we have some wayfinding signs that has the Old Town and that kind of stuff. And we've been talking about, these we have internally regarding potentially doing a new wayfinding and signage program that would help offset some of that, and create a more standard entry into Pinole in a way for, like, if you're coming into Pinole Valley, you're coming up through Pinole Valley Road, you'll see it, there'll be a gateway program that would in a signage program for maybe that corridor, or maybe as you're coming in off of Appian, or you're coming down into San Pablo, into Old Town, and coming from Hercules, coming the other way, of a new type of gates, what we call gateway signage, or I just lost it.
Wayfinding.
Wayfinding. I'm sorry, wayfinding, and develop those plans that would then be consistent throughout the community, so that you know when you're coming in, yeah, that's Old Town, whether you come in from different ways.
So how would that be different than the current, the current purple kind of signs?
Well, it would, like right now, there's like nothing in the medians that really tell you how to go. I mean, it would be similar to that in terms of the purple signs, but it would just be kind of updated, and then that way because now that the corridors have kind of been developed in that regard, now I think we can do, I don't know when that gateway program or wayfinding was done, but now that the corridors are pretty much kind of developed in a sense that in terms of their landscaping, at least Pinole Valley Road, there could be an opportunity to now renew that and do that and be able to bring in the trails and create a comprehensive wayfinding and signage that outlines those corridors, instead of just one general one for each of the. I mean, they'll be similar, but there will be some differences, so that you're in different parts of the community, and that way you can create that destination for each of the corridors, and that's kind of what people are looking for, more of those destinations and stuff like that. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. And then I just had one last thing. If you could refresh my mind, or maybe one of us can, we were talking about the bowling alley. I know, the bowling alley seems like it's here to stay. But one of the ideas of parking, just making parking more back, I don't know, but that parking lot is just an eyesore. I mean, trash collector, the whole works.
They have plans on redoing that whole area. In fact, we just I've been working with them right now probably the last 6 or 8 months on their color scheme. You approved, the subcommittee approved their color scheme. They were okay with changing it to more of the matching the Sprouts Center in terms of that color scheme. And so I'm working with them right now to get those colors and use what they use at Gateway to kind of make it more of a comprehensive or more, a similar look, so that where you're at. And I'm working on that with them. Regarding the parking lot, they did have a plan for the parking lot. However, with COVID, it kind of fell through the cracks. We have their original plan. We have told them that, we'll allow you to paint, but any type of restructuring of the outside, whether they're, changing their doors or anything, that will trigger the parking lot. So that they've got to, and as part of their access, and another reason why is their ADA access from the curb to be, even though they share a parking lot with Sprouts and that group, they still need to have their own ADA access from Pinole Valley Road to their front door. So that was the other reason why. So once they start even touching that, then we can go after the whole parking lot. And that's what we're going to do. So yeah.
Great. That's great. Thanks for keeping up communication about that. So I think those are the only things that I was mostly concerned about: the circulation, the parking lot issues, the creek, the gateway entrance. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Okay, Adam?
No, I didn't have any questions. Thanks.
Frankie?
Thank you. Well, so I just have a few questions for you, Dave. Is there any way that we can do some requirements for, and this goes back to what we've been working on, is we've got to get to that next generation, right? And we need those EV charging stations. Is there any way to put in requirements saying anytime we touch any of these properties, there's going to be a requirement for you to also include the EV charging stations?
Yeah, I mean, right now, the requirement is, I think, like one for every like 25 or 50 spaces right now. But what we're trying to get them to do, kind of like what we do with Saha, is at least get the conduit in to all the different spaces so that if and when they're ready for charging stations, that they can easily put them in. Yeah, turning them up. And that way, because they all need building permits. I mean, they all need some type, well, I should say electrical permits. So what we're trying to do with all of our businesses is that when you start looking at redoing your parking lots, I mean, redoing them, not just slurry sealing them, but actually, reconstructing them, that we start looking to put in some conduit for EV spots. So there's also, I know a couple of cities, I know Councilmember Tom's has talked about, adopting REACH codes regarding all electric buildings and those types of things. And so we're still looking into that. And I think it was either Berkeley or Oakland had adopted some. And I think actually Contra Costa County as well adopted some. So we're also looking at those to see what they require in terms of EV parking. Right now, it's pretty limited in terms of what we can require, or I guess what's required as part of the building code per se. But that's something that we're working on to see from a planning perspective of where we can add that, or where we can start conditioning these projects to put in that stuff.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that thorough answer. The next one is, and it may not have been on our call, it may have been a city council one. A gentleman called in from citizens to be heard, and he brought up, I'll just call them, for lack of a better term, the cut-ins. So the cut-ins would be the access lanes to get on I-80, because we all know anytime from 2 to 6 o'clock, that congestion on those on-ramps is really dangerous, especially if there are a fire. Fortunately, the fire station is going to open back in the valley, but until then, trying to get the fire truck through there during peak times, that's a project. Have we ever put plans on pen to paper to say, this is what it would look like, these are the players we need to work with, and how much is it going to cost to get us there?
I'd have to check with fire. They might have something like an EOP plan or some type of fire safety plan that they might have that has for what they are going to do with those types of lanes and getting people in and out of there. And I know, I'm pretty positive we don't have anything from a public works standpoint in terms of a standard for that roadway for that kind of stuff. So we probably need to check with fire on that to see if there's a plan, because a lot of our street standards and road standards and curb standards all come from Contra Costa County. We don't have like our own set of specifications. So that's something I'd have to talk to fire about, if they have anything of that nature in any type of their plans. They might have something for
even if they did it, I would think, especially because we're talking about adding more office space, we're gonna really start increasing the amount of pressure on that intersection right there at 80 and the Pinole Valley Road on both sides, right? And so we've got to be very thoughtful in the way that we approach it and say, okay, we know we already have a problem today. It's only going to get worse once we add all of this other stuff. So it behooves us now to put pen to paper and say, what do we need to do to get this done? Because that's obviously going to involve Caltrans. I mean, there's a lot of players involved, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's also a lot we can do in terms of there's some safety things that they can do, some wireless stuff that they can do to help clear the intersections before they get there, in terms of being able to turn the lights green before they get there. So a lot of traffic's moving through, or it needs to be moving so that they're not caught in anything. And so there's some timing issues, and there's some of those types of, I forget what the fire department calls them, but they have them in their trucks actually, and it's kind of a safety thing. They press a button or whatever, and it actually turns the lights green within like about 1,000 feet, so that they can move traffic through. So it's just not stopped; it's moving and it's going. And so to be able to get them on the freeway, or get them off get them off Pinole Valley Road where they need to go. So So those are something we can talk to fire about and see if that's something that they have or that they're already using that we don't know about, or something of that nature. So, but yeah, we can look at that.
Okay, and I think that's gonna take care of the questions I had. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of that on-ramp type stuff is really a Caltrans thing. Because I know there was some, looking at that some years back, and what shut it down was just the dealing with Caltrans. Because they have, total control over the on-ramps. And it's something that if you want to do it, you have to start doing it pretty soon. It's going to take years to get it through.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we probably wouldn't be able to touch the off ramps, but what would happen is that if we could do something, like I said, some of these programs, these in their software stuff that you can put in put in the new trucks to be able to offset those. So at least you get the traffic moving through the intersections, because we control those traffic signals.
Yeah, when they put in the signals on the on-ramps, part of the deal on that was that we were supposed to be able to override that if we ever need to, because the problem with the backing up is because of the signals on the on-ramps.
Right.
But I think they reneged on that, Caltrans, when they did that, because I remember we were asking about that. There was when we were on council, they came through and they were doing a presentation and about that after it was in, and there was a lot of questions about, well, there was concern about them backing up in the first place, and then when it really started happening, right. They really didn't care. They were more concerned about what's going on the freeway. They really care about the surface streets.
Yep, and that's Caltrans's way. It's the main line. The main line is the key to Caltrans. So.
Yeah, and so when they promised us that if we were okay with some of that, they would let us make a way for us to override it, but they pretty much lied to us about that. So
thank you, Tim.
Anyway, well, it's true. So anyway, Simon.
Thank you, Tim. So, I actually might not have questions, but a little bit more comment. I want to thank, Commissioner Martinez to bring up that questions. I think when we are looking into the potential of, specifically Pinole Valley Road Corridor, the specific plan, there is a lot of things we want to do, but there is also a lot of restrictions that we need to remember, like the restrictions of, we just talked about it, the intersection, the on-ramp and the off-ramp. I remember the fact that, we all debate about like, oh my God, I do not want to see that the chain link fence on the off-ramp from Pinole Valley Road, going to the west. Can't control it because it's contract. So at the end of the soil line, there is a stupid, I call it the stupid, chain link fence that's kind of, creating a little tiny gap over the wall. It looks ugly. Can't really do anything about it. We have to do a lot of coordination to say what, Chair, it's bringing up. The same thing happened in the creek. I'm pretty sure that I remember so many times that, our vice chair, Maradi actually brought up the questions. Hey, can we put a tree there? Hey, can we do a bench there? Hey, can we put a sign there? Can't really do about anything because, oh my God, Army Corps of Engineer do not want us to touch anything. So as much as we want to do a lot of good things for this, specific corridor and have a plan, there's a lot of coordinations that need to happen, and sometimes we are not big enough to even, put even a basic argument to it. I want to put a bench on the pathway. I don't know if we can do that. So are there any specific way, I guess bringing back from my comment to the questions to you, Dave, are there any ways that we can work together with the city council and figure out something to enhance it? Not only the fact that, that we have restrictions, but how we can, figure out a process to make that happen. Also, the coordination between this Pinole Valley Road Corridor Plan versus our Zimbabwe Plan or the Old Town, guidelines, because, hey, this is the two major corridors linking together. Discussions about how to plan those together to make that nicer transitions, to make, more bike friendly, to make more parking, to make the traffic flow better. All those are linked to this particular corridor plan, and it seems like that we have our hands tied that we can't really do much.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we need to start reaching out to those organizations again. I don't know what's been done. I don't know when the last time we really sat down with each of the organizations, like the Flood Control District or Caltrans, and I know from experience on some of the cities I've worked in, yeah, it's a continual conversation. So if you drop off the map, they let you drop off the map, and they don't really care. But I think it's time that we start looking at some of those agencies that we need to talk to and work with and start getting more communication between the city and those agencies, so yeah, if we want to put a park bench on there, we can just put a park bench. Or if we want to expand an area, or we want to do something to an area that we can. So, or at least let us get through the process that we need to get through. So yeah, I think those discussions need to be opened again in terms of with some of those other agencies, so that we can get some of these things done again. It might have dropped off the map. Like I said, it was probably hot in 2010, 2011, 2012, and it could have dropped off from 2012 to 2017, and maybe somebody brought something up then. But I think I've noticed that you've got to have continual relations with these guys and making sure that our plans, and sometimes they might have some actually some of these agencies, more the state agencies, not the regional ones, but sometimes the state agencies have some grant programs that we can tap into that would help us do some of those things. So that's something that we've got to start looking at doing. If these are the things that we want to do, then we need to start working with those agencies to make these things happen. And yeah, it's going to be time consuming. There's no question about it. It's going to take time and effort and all that. But I think, with what's been going on, at least in the Bay Area in the past, with being more, they got a bike lane across the bridge. That's the San Rafael Bridge. So if they can do that, then I think pretty much they can do a lot of different things. So I think that we just got to continue to reach out and keep up the conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, looking at the map that you were showing with the potential site 1, 2, and 3 in the south of Pinole, right? It will eventually come back to haunt us, and the same comments will bring back. Oh my God, traffic problem. Oh my God, parking problem.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Guess what? We can't really resolve it because we're going to hit the intersections. There's nothing we can do about it. Right. So I think it's need to be having a cohesive and continuous effort between the planning commission, the city council, and or even the citizens of Pinole to actually really start speaking up and say, hey, let's do something about it. Yeah. And just continue to do. I'm not going to use the word fight, but more like use the word coordinate. Right,
oh yeah, I mean it's about working with the other agencies and getting them to notice that we're here and all that kind of stuff, and try to use if they have different plans, or they have different ways of like with Caltrans. I mean, they've got like context sensitive solutions, and they've got partnership planning grants, and they've got sustainable community grants, and all kind of tie into land use planning and that. And if you can get them to get them to the table. Then sometimes it's a little easier to get the plans adopted, and then you can implement those plans. So that's something that we've got to reach out to all the agencies and see where they're at with their plans, and see where we can take advantage, either through grant opportunities or through their own plan, just through their own planning documents, that we can kind of somewhat put something in that might fit what they're looking for. So those are things that we've got to start doing again, is start reading, because I'm sure there's been a lot of updating there's been a lot of movement in circulation and transportation, just like there's housing laws. There's been a lot of movement the other way with bikes and non-motorized vehicles and that kind of stuff. And so we just got to be able to tap into that as well. So that's what we need.
Thank you, David. This is all my questions and comment. Thank you, the chair.
Mr. Curry.
Yes, I just want to give, again, historic perspective on some of the things that have been brought up. Ann brought up the thing about, why, if there's anything about the creek's improvements. And I just want to remind everybody that in 2010, there was a very big project that was in progress to do flood control for Pinole Creek at the time. And I think that because of that project going on, it just wasn't on the radar screen to actually put anything in the general plan or specific plans about having anything about having a creek improvement plan because it was underway at the time. The other thing I want to state about the access to the freeways is that I think it was really the county's transportations agency that put in the metering. That was part of the I-80 improvement plan. So I'm making that comment for a couple of reasons. Is I think that's probably the people that we should be talking to is the county agency. And at the time, the comments were brought up about, well, what happens if you have the metering and it starts backing up the local streets? And their comment was that the system would have a mechanism in it that would increase the metering to try to alleviate any congestion on the streets. So that was a promise that was made. Now, whether that's happening or not, I really don't know because I always make sure that I'm not on any roads near the freeways during the crunch. And actually, that's actually, you kind of laugh, but and rightfully so. But that's one of the things I've kind of learned in all my years of planning. It's like when there's parking issues, I say, well, like I remember when we were doing food for less in there, and there was a question about whether there was enough parking there or whatever. And the comment was made is that people learn when the best time to go to places are. And you could start thinking, oh my gosh, there's not enough parking or enough capacity. But people kind of learn about, when's the best time to go and when's the time to avoid. So, that's kind of a dynamic that goes with planning is that there's all these unintended consequences. So that's all I had. Otherwise, I really appreciate the, the presentation. Thank you.
Hey, Raphael, you spoke, didn't you?
Yeah, but I have some follow-up comments on some questions and comments that Frankie and Ann had, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so with regards to Ann's comment about the creek ordinance, I know that one big issue that's been coming up in the community relatively often since this summer has been the failure of part of the creek bed by sprouts or the collapse of the roadway. I know that's been brought up at city council meetings a few times, and I know I brought it up with the city planning commission, then with the county where they directed me to them back in the summer. And they said basically the city can't do anything about it. It's not under the city's control. It's under county waterways, like I think Dave just mentioned.
Flood control.
And with regards to the I-80 on-ramp and the I-80 and Pinole Valley Road sort of going eastbound, I remember that there was a presentation to the city council about that particular thing. I want to say back sometime in 2018 that some people from the county and from Caltrans came in and talked about various projects that were on a list to be funded as a result of, I believe it was Measure J funding. And that explicitly adding lanes to that particular on-ramp was like the very last item on the list, but it was on the list. It was something that was explicitly mentioned, and they said about the whole metering light issue. Basically, part of the deal for the funding was that you accepted that Caltrans could use the metering lights to create negative local traffic impacts, if I'm recalling the meeting correctly, which I may not be. It was a few years ago, but I just figured that would be a relevant point to consider our discussions because I distinctly recall that that particular on-ramp had a project linked with it at the county level, and that was brought up to the city council a few years back. I don't know what the state of that project is now. I know there was a long list of other similar projects, but I do know that it's not completely ignored at any rate. And that's all.
When we were doing this particular part of the specific plan, we knew it was going to be very variable because of this part of it is commercial at the very beginning and it drops off to residential right off the bat. So there was a lot of discussion about passing through and things like that. At the same time, the high school was getting started, and there was concern about the increased traffic from when the new high school is going to be done, which generated all those signals on there and rearrangement of some of the signals. Right after that was the signaling on the freeways, which never ended up being the way we thought it was going to be. But at the same time, it ended up the way we thought it was going to really be anyway, because we didn't think we were being told the truth, and we weren't. So it's a interesting area because of the the variance, and I kind of think I was thinking that San Pablo Avenue had more variance to it, just because of the various parts you travel through. But actually, the Pinole Valley corridor has some pretty almost immediate changes. They kind of come up to you all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So in regards to the creek, the thing that Dave was talking about was an experimental creek project where they were kind of getting rid of the old Army Corps of Engineers construction and trying to make the creek drain naturally. And with that came a little bit of a signage program. I remember we picked out signs around the creek area. I remember there were little ducks or little, little turtles or something like that. I can't remember whatever they are is down there is what we picked. And it was kind of more of a natural way to drain the creek out. And there were ideas to continue that all the way to the bay. That was a phase 1, and that was about $1 million, as I recall, back in 2009, 2010. And there was plans for a phase 2, but there was never any funding, so it of course never went anywhere. But the idea was very interesting. You're trying to go back to the way the creek was. So ideally, if there was some way to kind of see whether there was something like that, those kind of funds for something like that, that could continue down out to the bay, which would kind of help everybody upstream from that. It's kind of hard to do creek things because a lot of the creek areas border on private property. But there's some public that things like that can handle. There are, like Simon was saying, there's lots of overcrossing agencies that get involved whenever we think of these things. Caltrans is probably the biggest one. One thing to think about is, when we replace that, the overpass that's going out of town on the way to Hercules, there has to be some thought to what's, kind of ancillary things around that. How's that really going to look, and things like that haven't even really been discussed yet because, it's still pretty much in the planning stages. I think, and Jen, we mentioned this before, we talked about some of our new multifamily projects that are coming along. We really need to start thinking a little bit more and putting more action towards the improvement of our public transportation locally. A lot of what's going on in the Bay Area is heavily based on already established public transportation. There's lots of development in El Cerrito right now, but they have bus lines going back and forth and sideways there. Some of the things that we're talking about, even tonight with the ADUs and there are people that want to get rid of cars altogether, but you have to have the infrastructure in terms of public transit to make that work, and the correct kind of transit. There was a time when the city got a grant for the 16 bus that went through Pinole Valley, and so during that time, you see the 16 bus go by, there'd be nobody on it. And so why do we have such a big bus if it's not being used? Why don't we use little buses? Well, the grant only covered big buses. So, what's the point of that? Why couldn't we do something that would make sense to something more locally? So, so there's always that kind of a thing in terms of, finding the money and then making sure the money is appropriate to what you want to use, or what kind of interpretation you have when you find the funding source. Can you really do what you really want to do? So there's layers upon layers of these kind of things. And I think it's important to kind of start looking at things, choosing our battles, and making a plan to get these things to work. Because we're talking about stuff that's not, in the midst of a 5-year CIP. We're talking about things that are 10 and 20 years out.
Yeah.
We're halfway through the general plan and specific plans that were set up, when I was working on them, and there's already changes just in the 10 years that we didn't have any idea that we were going to see. They were starting the parking reduction thing back then, but it's happened more and more. And the need for public transit, has really increased pretty dramatically, but the actual service hasn't really increased that much in Pinole. And so, and a lot of these things we're hearing here in terms of these multifamily or some of the senior citizen centers and those kind of things, they talk a lot about public transit, but we really don't have it. So there's got to be some pressure put on someone like Westcat, and their of course are also limited by their funding sources. And Westcat's a fairly conservative group and do very well with their money, but they're not in a position to kind of take some chances, and maybe that's what we have to start asking them about, because we need support on all these corridors for more public transit in order for all these other things we're talking about, if we want to increase density in places and things like that, to work. So, and like I said, some of these things that we've been talking about tonight, a lot of them really weren't totally thought seriously about when these specific area plans were started. It was a hope on some of these things, but they were way far out, so far out in the future it seemed that we never thought that even before the next update was done that we'd ever see them. Right. So it's interesting how things have come the way they are. No one saw the pandemic, no one saw the downturn, and so there's a lot of things that occur when you're doing these things that really can affect them when you don't think they would. So I'm glad that we were having these conversations about this. It just kind of shows that we're almost, we may have to do a little more tweaking on the things that we thought were going to last 20 years, 10 years ago, because so many things have changed. And I think it's good that we're talking about all this stuff, because who knows what's going to happen in another 5 or 10 years. One of the things that's, in the future we're going to see autonomous cars, and I've been on, when I was on the city council, and there I went on several things where they showed experimental autonomous cars, just to ride these little buses around that were running themselves, and it was a really neat idea. And then whether that works or you have personalized ones, where are you going to put all those things? Is that going to fly in the face of the current fad of reducing individual parking? So, I mean, there's lots of things still ahead of us that we're not even thinking about that we can't yet because we just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So, but I'm glad that we're talking about these things now, because these are things that, have been kind of in the background, kind of floating around, thought they might happen, wasn't sure when, but they're definitely coming to the forefront. So, again, I think that we really need to be in contact with our council sooner than later in terms of bringing us to the level where they're they're the money people, and they have to direct staff and to find some of these sources or find places we can tie into other people, and other entities to generate these things so we can actually have them. So I think this gets me back to making sure we really do have a joint meeting at some time. We used to have them every year, and we don't seem to have them at all anymore. So I think that's something that's every time I think of those things, it's like we need to have more than one because our list is getting pretty long. So I think in the next year, since we're pretty much shot for this year, really need to push for a joint meeting with the council and bring these things, pick the ones that are the most important to us and put them to the forefront and see what we can do to start getting to look at these things. So that's the end of my soapbox for this. So I think if we're all done, we can go on to the next thing, which is the Planning Commission schedule for next year, for 2022. So David, I guess that's for you again.
Yeah, so pretty much last year we kind of instituted the 2 meetings back per month, and so this time we decided that we're going to start them off at the beginning of the year, and this is kind of the meeting schedule that we've got so far, and what we're looking for the next year. We still only have the one meeting in December because that's, you know, with Christmas and all that. The second one usually falls either the week of Christmas or the week after Christmas, and people are busy and traveling, so we'll still have the one meeting in February or December scheduled. But other than that, everything looks good. So if you guys, if this is a schedule that you guys would take a look at and approve, then we just need a motion and go from there.
The only other place that I would see in here, David, is I imagine if COVID things kind of continue to dissipate, we may have, you know, we used to be in August, we'd have our national night out, and it usually, you know, took the first week of August, and it usually moved the city council meeting, and it sometimes tended to move the planning commission meeting depending on when it, you know, what was going on. So that could be something that could be, you know, modified at that point. That's just the only thing I thought I saw here that would be a possible variation.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any comments on this?
Yeah, only that I was thinking exactly what you brought up earlier, that there's no coordinated meeting with city council, or even a, you know, this could be a potential place. I mean, that we could do that. I mean, David, do you need to speak with Mr. Murray about that?
Yeah, what'll happen is that Lily and I will talk about it tomorrow, and then we'll take it to City Manager Murray and see what we can do potentially. He'll probably want to talk to the mayor, vice mayor, to see what we can do. I mean, my guess is that it'll probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of May or June. Most of the time they do that right before the fiscal year starts. I mean, it could be a little sooner than that, but we'll have to meet with Andrew, City Manager Murray to schedule that.
And I think that's kind of when they were. It seemed, I kind of was trying to remember when they were. There seems like they were like April or May.
Yeah.
Before, you know, finance season started.
Okay. So yeah, let's see if we can at least send an email to say, hey,
yeah,
you know, there's some things we're thinking about that it'd be really good to work together with. Other than that, I don't have any comments.
And something like that could be, that gives us a lot of time to kind of consolidate our list of things to talk about too. And
yeah, I would start putting them, if you have things that you can either start sending them to me, like with the heading of, you know, joint use or joint meeting agenda items or joint as you start, and I can start putting them all together. And there might be some research that we might need to do on some of them. So if you could get those to me by, let's say, end of February, that way we can start working on it in March and maybe for a potential meeting in April, something of that nature. And then we can start putting some stuff to it.
okay. Does anyone else have any comments on this thing?
Yeah, I do. I just want to again remind that on October 10th, that's Indigenous Peoples Day. I guess that's not a holiday for the city, but I think it's a holiday for for many people.
Okay.
But a lot can happen between then and now, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had one comment. The February 14th is Valentine's Day.
Oh yeah, that one's gone.
What? You guys aren't okay. Well, what we can do is we can cancel the meetings once we get there. I mean, so.
Thank you.
Planning commission
We all want
meetings
to
are
keep
so
our marriages.
You might actually have an item on that day, so we're still debating on stuff. So happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, and you missed my birthday in August. There are several council meetings and planning commission meetings. I was there on my birthday, so
Yeah.
I'm looking out this next year. So does anyone else have any comments on this?
I just agree with David's comment that, you know, it'd be good for us to not have a meeting on Indigenous Peoples Day in October if we can avoid that. I prefer to avoid that.
Well, we can take it off the list. If you guys want to make a motion to pull that date off, we can. We just have one meeting in October.
Yeah, then I guess I'd make a motion to remove the October 10th meeting date.
I'll second that, Raphael.
Okay, so we can add that to the overall motion.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, Raphael, do you want to go ahead and make a motion, since you're going to modify it on this, on the calendar, on accepting the calendar with those
Sure. I
modifications?
move that we adopt the Planning Commission 2022 regular meeting schedule as modified by my motion.
And along with Valentine's Day.
Yeah, because a lot of people still want to keep their marriage going.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's all it takes.
My meeting.
But we could probably have another motion for that, right?
Add that to the.
I just added the motion.
Yeah,
Okay.
just add it to that one.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion, do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, so let's do our roll call vote. So Alex, you want?
Here we go. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Commissioner Menes,
Aye.
Commissioner Current,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Benzuli,
Aye.
Vice Chair Moriarty,
Aye.
Chair Banuelos.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. So we'll update you. We'll get you an updated schedule with those dates on it. With that note out too.
Okay. Oh, did we include on that? Or is it already kind of just being done anyway, the squeezing in somewhere? You have to talk to the city manager about the joint meeting.
Yeah, most of the time when you do a joint meeting, you're on the council's agenda. They're not on your agenda. So
Right, yeah.
So since they meet on Tuesdays and the second and fourth Tuesdays, or first and third Tuesdays, it shouldn't interfere with our schedule. But you might have an added meeting. We'll have to notice it as a planning commission, as a joint meeting.
Mhm. Yeah,
So and we'll go through that.
yeah, from our end, it'll be an extra one, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty, so now we're at city planners and commissioners reports.
I'll go ahead and start. I am working on the 3 remaining multifamily projects that are looking to come forward to you guys. We're looking at Appian Village coming down the chute first, probably in the latter part of January, and with the other 2 projects coming in February. And so we're working on those. We have sent out an RFP for our housing element. So we'll be getting a consultant on board to start that process, which the Planning Commission will be involved in. And which has it'll have work done for our housing and safety element, which is consistent with state law, as well as potentially some SB2 work regarding our environmental impact report for our general plan, and some objective standards. So that's another process that we'll be working through with that. With that, and then we'll be looking at probably doing some code updates with the with all the new SB, all the housing laws that are coming through. So those will be on the horizon coming to you guys. I still have the Appian Way corridor, so that'll be coming to you here shortly, maybe within the next couple of meetings. And then we're working on just and those are probably more of the long range type plans. And then whatever comes out of the joint meeting. But I am also working with, just to let you know, I am trying to work with WestCat, because a lot of these projects are contingent upon transit, and that we do have 2 lines that run through the city that aren't operating, that we want to try to get operating again to help that cause. So we'll be working with them to try and get those started. With that, that's all I have.
You have an ad hoc design review meeting?
Yes, I wanted to bring that. That was what I just remembered. I want to schedule an ad hoc subcommittee meeting on either January 5th or 6th. So Thursday or Friday, I think. Is what they're. No, it's Wednesday or Thursday. Wednesday or Thursday.
Either of those are fine with me.
Okay. And basically what we're going to be doing is, and I'll send out an invite, is we're taking a look again at the 3 remaining projects and just give you an update of a thorough update of where we're at, get you the most current design plans and what's kind of taken place since the last one. And if there are any issues that we need to make sure that we need to get involved with, that we need to get in front of you guys as part of the project, So I will send out an invite. It'll probably be for the 5th. Where am I at?
Dave, this is Frankie. Can we, if it's Tim and Ann, would the 6th possibly work for your schedules?
What day does that fall on?
It's a Thursday.
As long as it's later on Thursday, yeah, that'd be all right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be like about a 4th, it'd be like probably a 5 o'clock meeting. So I know Tim's got, you might have some more, Frankie. It's probably gonna be a little bit after 5, so.
You just tell me the time and I can make it.
Okay.
You know, on this one, Dave, which project would we be looking into?
We're gonna take a look at Appian Village.
Okay.
Because that's the first one, and we will probably look at Pinole Vista, the bigger project. So those 2 projects, but our main concern is Appian Village right now. And what we might do is, if I can work with the committee, is schedule a couple of meetings in January, like a couple of weeks to review them individually, so that we concentrate our focus on that one project. So we have a little bit. We've got time with Pinole Vista and the 2801 Pinole Valley Road, because we're not scheduling those until the latter part of February. So we've got a little bit of time on that. But the 5th will definitely be Appian Village. That's what we're going to be talking about and what we're going to be doing. So
The 6th.
The 6th.
You're also talking about some community meetings?
Yeah, I'm working with the applicants to do one more round of community meetings, and so so those will be here relatively soon as well. So again, for them to reach out to their 1,000-foot radius group and let them, again, see if we have comments and if there are people out there with the projects and that kind of stuff. Now that we're getting closer to the meetings. So yeah, those aren't official planning commission meetings. We're gonna let the applicant, kind of pick the date for those, but you'll be informed of when they are. So, and they'll all be Zoom meetings like we had before. So make sure that all of you get the Zoom link. So if you just want to sit in and listen and go from there, you'll get those as well.
Speaking of which, have you heard anything about going back to the chambers?
No. We thought we were going to go back in the first of the year, but that is not happening. So, at least from my knowledge, unless there's something coming up, I don't think. Something tells me that we probably won't be back until the spring.
Okay.
I would just say that on a night like this, I'm glad we are Zooming.
Yeah. Because we have been out on nights like this.
Yeah.
Like this, or nights when it's 114 degrees or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, we've all done those. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that it for you, David?
One last thing, because I know maybe Commissioner Moriarty will bring it up. I'm setting up a meeting right now with the property owner for Gateway to go over the last 3 things that regarding their landscaping and their bonds, all that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to schedule a meeting with them either this week or next, probably be the week after Christmas. But to sit down with them and go over, because I've got to get some emails, because there's some correspondence between Tamara and the project proponent. So I got to haul those in and make sure that we've got everything in line on that. So
yeah, that's good.
Awesome.
Going to developer, the longer it goes, they're going to essentially go trees. What trees?
Well, yeah, but we're still holding on to about 50 grand. So they they want to get it released. So we want to make sure that we can work with them to make sure all of the improvements are in that are needed, and then we'll work with them to get that bond released. So, but just to let you know, I'm scheduling a meeting with them for the next couple of weeks.
That's great. I appreciate you following up on that. And actually, I really appreciate, I was looking through the minutes before that we had the citizen comments and things like that. And you had agreed to address, these different things. And I was going through the list, and it looks like we've addressed or spoken about all of those things. So that's really good. So we just want to acknowledge that. The one thing that I did see that was a little bit later, it wasn't from this gentleman, but was about there being a request to red stripe part of San Pablo Avenue by where right before John Street.
Yeah, I'm still kind of looking to see what has to do that, because that takes a cancel action. So anytime you start red striping streets and those types of things. So
I really can't believe anyone would ever want to try and park there, but
yeah, I haven't seen anybody park there, but
Is that right in front of John Street, just before you go in?
yeah.
Yeah, the part where it narrows in, I think, and there's a curb.
Yeah. So yeah, on that one, we're still trying to figure out what we're gonna do with that one, but
Okay.
that's the only one.
Great. Well, thank you for at least, bringing up everything, all these other things and getting those addressed. We appreciate that.
No problem.
Dave, if I could just bring up one last one, and maybe it's just me. My email never worked for the city.
Yeah. And Tim, that happened with Tim too. And this is what, and I'm gonna ask Eric. Eric, I know this is a tough ask for you right now, but could you allow me to? I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see, I want to do this one, and I want to show you how. Because there were issues regarding the emails, and so I worked with IT, and he showed me, and we tried to set it up the kind of the way that I go into my emails when I'm away from my desk. So, Eric, if you could allow me to share my screen. I don't have my button.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So everyone sees my screen, right?
No.
Okay.
Is your screen say City Planners Commissioners Report? This is the regular screen.
No, it should say, where can I share it? I don't have my.
Your Zoom screen up?
Yeah, I don't have my, share screen, here we go.
It's in the bottom, isn't it? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, let me pull up share screen. This will stop the others, yes. Okay, so, yeah, I'm gonna pull up, there you go. Okay, so everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically at the very end where it says employee email, if you click on that, it comes up to my email, right? So, but if I, let's see, if you come to this screen, if you go to Outlook, it'll ask for your username and your password. Okay, it doesn't to mine because I'm already entered in. I'm already in it. So, but you'll come to this and it'll ask for your email and your passwords, which you all have, right? You all have your passwords, your city emails and passwords.
We have our passwords, but my problem is that I tried setting up Outlook some years ago, and it's just not really clean for me.
Okay, so, but if you go through the city website as an employee quote, it might be a little easier for you to do that. And if you put in your name and your...
Yeah. It's unfortunate, David, but I did that. And maybe it's because our home email is Outlook. So I can't get away from my own personal email, even when I go through.
On your Outlook,
Add emails.
I was going to say you can add emails onto it. So if you add your email, your City of Pinole website, when you come back onto it, you'll be able, it'll bring that one up and you can click on it. So if you need to add an email to your Outlook or your Yahoo or your Google or however it comes up. And then you go through that process and just enter your email and your password. And it should take you to your city email.
All right. I'll try.
So, and what he's talking about, if you go into Outlook, and hopefully this will help all of us, on the Outlook bar on the left side, it's new mail, accounts, folders, inbox, all that.
Yeah.
At the very bottom, you've got your email, calendar, contacts, a checkbox, and then there's a little icon that's the settings. When you click on that, a menu bar jumps up on the right side, and it's the manage accounts.
Okay.
If not, you can come into City Hall and I can kind of direct you through another, we can try to do it, get it through. Because I tried it with Tim's this morning and it worked, right, Tim?
Yeah, I just have to do it now, huh?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So, because we did the other way, you had to have Outlook, you had to have all that. Whereas if you're going in as an employee email, and automatically, since our email server set up on Outlook, then it's just a matter of adding your email to that account, or adding that account, your email as your account to be able to get that in. And then you use your password, and then you should be able to get into it.
Okay, I'll try that.
If you get that to work, then the bonus round is have them go in and have them put it on your phone.
So, but anyway, so that's that. You can do it that way. And I have all your passwords and all your codes. So if you need your password, just let me know, and I'll send it your way.
Okay.
All right, yeah, all right. I'll come in because I don't see an add account when I'm under my account manager, so.
Call me tomorrow. I'll give you IT and.
Figure it out. Thank you, Frankie. That's your profession, okay. Shine a cup of coffee.
Okay.
Definitely. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so that's kind of it for the reports. Are there any communications? Anyone have anything they want to bring up or say or anything like that?
Sure, just wanted to wish everybody a happy holiday since, the next time we're gonna be meeting is in the new year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I echo that. Happy holidays to everyone, and
Okay.
Yeah, and stay dry.
Yeah. If you live by the creek, watch the big creek banks, make sure you don't flood. Do we have the thing that we had in the past where you can come get sand and sandbags?
Yeah, you can get them. There was a sign on Plum. I think that, I don't know if the firehouse is passing out the bags. I don't know where you get the sand at. I don't know if we dumped the sand over there or not. But I know there was a sign for sandbags on as you come on Pinole Valley Road towards the firehouse.
Okay. Just look for the sand swirling away if you want to do that. So.
Shit.
Okay. Well, our next meeting is going to be in the new year. It's going to be on January 10th at 7 o'clock. So I'm lifting my virtual gavel and adjourning the meeting.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Happy holidays.
happy holidays.
Hey, Alex. Before you get off, are you going to be in the office tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Cause I gotta call you. I gotta ask you about a couple things. So.
Yeah.
Perfect.